Hello, welcome everybody. This is Kim Berry-Jones from the Center for Justice and Reconciliation at Point Loma Nazarene University. And I'm so happy to have you here tonight joining us for this webinar. This is the first time we've done something like this. So we are really thrilled to have you with us. We have people from all over. We have students from Point Loma Nazarene University joining us that attend different classes whose professors have recommended they watch this. We have people that have been a part of Churches Against Trafficking over the years, and we have just general public interested in knowing more about trafficking. What we're hoping to do tonight is give you a little peek into what human trafficking looks like in our region. The Center for Justice and Reconciliation at Point Loma has been deeply involved in the work to fight human trafficking for many years now. And in fact, we were part of some groundbreaking research that was done in conjunction with the University of San Diego that quantified for the first time the amount of trafficking going on in our region, what it looks like, who's being trafficked, who the traffickers are. It was the first time a major metropolitan area had ever been really researched deeply, and it was a game changer for the university as it set us in a position where we began to get more deeply involved in the anti-trafficking work around the region. So that is what led us to the different programs that we're going to be telling you a little bit more about tonight that we're involved in here at the center. And before we get to that, though, I am going to kick it off with an introduction of Charisma De Los Reyes. Charisma is one of our valiant fighters in this region against trafficking. She is an alum of the university and also an adjunct professor. She spent many years in San Diego Child Welfare Services as the primary point person around trafficking issues and the trafficking of children. She's now at the San Diego County Office of Education. And we are going to be sharing a video that she pre-recorded with you, but she is also with us here tonight. And what we're really hoping is that you will stick with us until the end and be a part of helping us do some question and answers. You'll see a poll on your screen right now, and I don't want you to miss out on the chance for joining us by telling us what sparked your interest in this webinar, what brought you here tonight. We've got a couple choices that you can do that. Hit submit. We'd love to hear from you. We'll be doing a few polls throughout the evening. And we also have a chat box for questions. If you look down at the bottom of your screen, you will see a little chat bubble. And that chat bubble will allow you to ask questions throughout the evening. We're going to be tracking those questions, and then at the end of the video that we show you, we will be answering those. So we not only have Charisma with us today, but we also have two other local experts, Jessica Kim and Keelin Washington. They are both also with us right now and have done a pre-recorded short video also, and will be joining us for the Q&A after the video shows. So we are going to get started on our video now, and then stick with us for about, the video is about 45 minutes, but it's in 3 parts. Charisma will be jumping into what is trafficking, what does it look like in San Diego. Keelin and Jessica will be giving some more detail about some of the area activity and what's being done to combat trafficking. And then what I'm looking forward to most tonight is the Q&A with these 3 experts. So please send your questions through chat anytime during the evening. I'll be tracking those questions as they come in and then punting them off to our 3 experts as soon as the video is over. So we are going to switch now over to our video, and then I will be back along with Charisma, Keelin, and Jessica to do some Q&A in a little bit. Thanks again for joining us.
Good evening all, and a special thank you to Point Loma Nazarene University's Center for Justice and Reconciliation for the invitation to be part of tonight's discussion on human trafficking. As I was preparing for this webinar, amidst this time of uncertainty due to the pandemic of COVID-19, for some reason brought me back to the 2013 natural disaster, Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines, where more than 6,000 people were killed. According to the United Nations officials, about 11 million people were affected and many were left homeless. The city administrator for Tacloban said that 90% of the city was destroyed. As I watched the news from across the world, I immediately became worried and even panicked and thought about what can I do? And as I thought about the families and communities I stayed with during a previous trip. In December of 2013, a few weeks after the typhoon hit, I was selected to be part of a delegation to travel to the affected areas of the Philippines, namely the islands of Leyte and Samar. Our group was in charge of providing trauma response training to local social service organizations who were deployed to assist the people in those areas. Some of the topics we trained on were how to understand and anticipate human needs in the major phases of disaster response and recovery. How do you implement psychological first aid? Identify evidence-based interventions to alleviate psychological trauma. Organize tent cities and create new community structures. Resume education in temporary structures and establish wellness centers in schools. Establish long-term care options for children who have lost their parents. And also, how do you meet the needs, the special needs of the ill and the elderly? That experience taught me a lot about community care, mutual aid, and resilience. Often, emergencies and disasters are used interchangeably, but FEMA describes the terms of emergency and disaster as being at two ends of a scale. At one end of the spectrum, emergencies are usually small-scale, localized incidents which are resolved quickly using local resources. And at the other end of the spectrum, disasters are typically large-scale and cross geographic, political, and academic boundaries. Disasters require a level of response and recovery greater than local communities can provide. The global impact of human trafficking can be seen both as a man-made emergency and disaster, where millions of people each year suffer the devastating effects, both short-term and long-term, of exploitation. The topics I'll cover tonight are the basics of what is human trafficking globally, how prevalent is it, and describe some terms and definitions. Next, we'll hone in on San Diego to get a more localized perspective and move into discussing some challenges of the digital age and trafficking as big business. And lastly, we'll wrap up my section with the framework of human trafficking as a violation of human rights. The International Labor Organization, in a 2017 report on the global estimates of modern slavery, indicate that at any given moment in 2016, an estimated 40.3 million people were in modern slavery, including 24.9 million in forced labor and 15.4 million in forced marriage. It meant that there were 5.4 victims of modern slavery for every 1,000 people in the world. 1 in 4 victims of modern slavery were children. And women and girls were disproportionately affected by forced labor, accounting for 99% of victims in the commercial sex trade and 58% in other sectors. In late 2000, the United Nations ratified the protocol to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in persons, especially women and children, supplementing the United Nations Convention against Transnational Organized Crime, also known as the Palermo Protocol. The United States Trafficking Victims Protection Act, also passed in 2000, reinforced the framework of the Palermo Protocol, employing the 3P paradigm: prosecution, protection, and prevention. Later, the 4th P would be added, representing partnership, to enlist all segments of society in the fight against modern slavery. The TVPA can easily be understood through the AMP model, which breaks it down into 3 components: action, means, and purpose. The action is to induce, recruit, harbor, transport, provide, or obtain using the means of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of commercial sex or labor services. It's important to note that minors induced into any commercial sex are human trafficking victims, regardless if force, fraud, or coercion is present. In 2007 is where I began to advocate for the protection of children who were commercially sexually exploited. I was a social worker for the County of San Diego's Child Welfare Services Agency, conducting investigations and providing case management services to families. But it wouldn't be until 9 years later, 2016, when the California State Legislature would pass AB 1322, California's Safe Harbor Act, the decriminalization of minors involved in prostitution. In that time in between is where the critical work of collaboration was formally established. 2011 was a pivotal year for the fight against human trafficking. Through the leadership of County Supervisor Diane Jacob, the County Board of Supervisors formed the County of San Diego's Human Trafficking and Commercial Sexual Exploitation of Children Regional Advisory Council. This kind of political will and support helped to pave the way later for Dr. Amy Carpenter with the University of San Diego and Dr. Jamie Gates with Point Loma Nazarene University to investigate the nature and assess the scope of gang involvement in sex trafficking in San Diego County. Prior to this study published in 2016, much of what was known about sex trafficking in San Diego County was anecdotal and descriptive. The study's basic premise was that imperial investigation would prove useful for both policy and practice. Some of the findings from the study include, it was estimated that the size of the illicit sex economy in San Diego County in 2013 was $810 million. There was a strong evidence that gangs in San Diego are engaged in the commercial sexual exploitation of people and children. It was estimated that the total number of people sex trafficked in San Diego County ranges from 3,000 to 8,000 people per year. Almost 80% of sex trafficking victims in the social service system are primarily born in the United States. The Carpenter and Gates study also found that the average age of entry into sex trafficking in San Diego County was 16.1 years of age. As a social worker in the field, this study empirically supported what I was seeing for years in my investigations and community work. I was identifying youth between the ages of 12 to 17 who were being exploited or were somehow connected with the underground commercial sex economy. In 2014, the Preventing Sex Trafficking and Strengthening Families Act passed at the federal level. This law provided guidance to states to draft and implement policies and procedures to protect children and youth who were involved in prostitution. Prior to this federal law passing, children were arrested and detained in juvenile hall for prostitution charges. As a child welfare social worker, this meant that children involved in prostitution were being arrested for their own sexual abuse. As a social worker, this made no sense to me that a child who experienced sexual abuse at the hands of an adult would be arrested and charged. We don't arrest rape victims for the sexual assault that they've experienced. The state law was very clear that children under the age of 18 could not consent to sex, let alone decide that they could sell themselves for sex. But when it came to children who were mostly children of color from low socioeconomic communities, they weren't seen as victims at all. They were seen as children. They weren't seen as children being taken advantage of or commodified. They were seen as children who made a choice and liked what they were doing. This narrative needed to change. In all of my years in child abuse, I learned that sexual behaviors were learned behaviors. This meant that children didn't come up with sexual behaviors themselves, but that they were exposed, groomed, or taught. Several studies cite that up to 90% of adults in the sex industry experience sexual abuse as children. There definitely was strong evidence to support early suspicions that childhood trauma was a far-reaching common characteristic. But without proper legislation, training, and major shifts in practice, child protection agencies across America legally could not serve these children because they had no jurisdiction to do so. Starting in late 2015, in my tenure as the CSEC Program Coordinator for Child Welfare Services, I was in charge of designing and implementing San Diego County's CSEC program. I relied heavily on the relationships I built when I was in the field to create, collaborate, and coordinate this CSEC program. Several partners were part of the CSEC steering committee, such as the DA's office, Law Enforcement Human Trafficking Task Force, Education, Behavioral Health Services, Juvenile Court, Probation, Children's Legal Services, and San Diego Youth Services, and many, many more stakeholders. Together, we developed the CSEC Interagency Protocol, a multi-agency agreement that outlined the roles and responsibilities of each agency to be victim-centered, trauma-informed, and culturally responsive. Policies and procedures to improve approach and service delivery were part of this agreement, as well as the CSEC liaison program to ensure knowledge, expertise, and consistent practice was done throughout the county. The commercial sexual exploitation identification screening tool, the CEIT, to identify victims or those at risk and get them connected to services quickly. Overall training of social workers, participating in community trainings, and of course, prevention. Most importantly, to prevent more children from becoming first-time victims. More recently, as of January, my goal to reach more children and youth, and not just youth in foster care, I transitioned to my current role as a project specialist with the San Diego County Office of Education. I'm part of a team that supports schools and school districts to institute programs of student wellness and positive school climate. Preventing the commercial sexual exploitation of children is one of the many areas our team covers. A mix of practice wisdom from people working in the anti-trafficking community and the empirical findings of Dr. Carpenter and Dr. Gates' study encouraged innovative approaches aimed at protecting and empowering students, such as the development of a school reporting protocol model that is nationally recognized, creation of a theater-based awareness training program, who you'll hear more about later, and a school personnel training model that brings together multiple agencies to arm teachers, counselors, social workers with the knowledge and steps of how to safely intervene with their students. One of the biggest challenges we are faced with is the ease of access that exploiters, both facilitators of trafficking and buyers of sex, have to our students. Additional reports have since been published that continue to deepen our understanding of how trafficking occurs, particularly in the digital age. In Thorne's 2018 study, they show technology is playing an increasing role in grooming and controlling victims of commercial sex. Their findings include that 1 in 6 victims were trafficked under the age of 12. Only 45% of victims entering the life in 2015 reported meeting their trafficker face-to-face. The remaining 55% reported the use of text, website, or app. What this study also described was how sex buyers use technology. Online advertising was also associated with an increased number of buyers per day. 1 in 7 respondents who were advertised on the street reported more than 10 buyers per day. But by comparison, 1 in 4 respondents who were advertised online reported more than 10 buyers per day. Understanding online behaviors is crucial to the prevention of sex trafficking. There are some promising new developments in the use of apps to engage youth who are system involved to prevent further harm. And companies like Thorn invest time in hackathons to disrupt illegal activities, as well as work with law enforcement agencies to track online predators. We cannot forget that human trafficking is big business. Human trafficking earns profits of roughly $150 billion a year for traffickers, according to the ILO report from 2014. The following is a breakdown of profits by sector. 99 billion from commercial sexual exploitation, 34 billion in construction, manufacturing, mining, and utilities, 9 billion in agriculture, including forestry and fishing. $8 billion is saved annually by private households that employ domestic workers under conditions of forced labor. In closing, it is evident that human trafficking is a multifaceted, complex issue that will take all of us. No one agency, organization, sector, or discipline is or should be responsible for abolishing human trafficking. We will need to expand our thinking, allocate resources to disrupting supply chains, investing in prevention, which should include protecting our most basic of human rights, the right to be free. While the focus of our topic has largely been on sex trafficking, we cannot overlook the interconnected aspects of a person's life. For example, family, relationships, education, employment, community, voting rights, etc., and how those aspects can make people vulnerable to becoming victims of human trafficking. This means a shift to a comprehensive and inclusive human rights paradigm, a human rights paradigm that requires using the person of vulnerability or POV perspective and framework. Most of our efforts as a nation have been uneven. We need a more collaborative approach that addresses the underlying inequities of access and equality. It's been 20 years since the ratification of the UN's Palermo Protocol, as well as the United States TVPA. A lot of good work has been done, but we still have a long way to go. In a 2008 United Nations Office on Drug and Crime background paper, stressed to successfully assist vulnerable populations to protect themselves from harm is not possible without an understanding of what makes them vulnerable to violence, abuse, and exploitation in the first place. Reframing the issue of prevention through a definition of vulnerability to abuse and exploitation will allow for a more consistent approach to trafficking. My sincerest gratitude to everyone who is participating tonight, and I'm looking forward to the Q&A portion. I will now yield to our next two presenters who will share prevention efforts they've been involved with to abolish human trafficking.
Hello, everyone. I am so blessed to be here and a part of this time with everyone. I first wanted to thank Charisma for sharing all that she did and going over all of some incredibly important information with us about human trafficking, what it looks like, what we can do as far as prevention goes. I'm just so blessed to be a part of this with her and Jessica as well. I know this can be a hard topic to cover, so I do appreciate all that they both do. Secondly, I wanted to thank everyone who has been able to remotely join us. I know there is a lot going on in the world right now with the pandemic, and you have all found some time to join us, and for that I am extremely grateful. I will just cover over a couple of things for us today. Human trafficking has a way of impacting us all, whether we know it or not. And I've searched for many years for my purpose, and it's led me to the work that I do now. And I'm fortunate to work on both sides of the spectrum, so which would be prevention, but also recovery. The prevention that I currently do, it all started with Point Loma's Center for Justice and Reconciliation. and their No More program, which was actually developed by a team consisting of researchers, survivor leaders, experts from child welfare, victim services, and there are just so many other programs that have helped in the development of this program. Now, No More is a drama-based and student-centered human trafficking awareness and prevention curriculum. It does serve middle school and high school age youth here in San Diego County. The curriculum, it was designed to help young people recognize the red flags and vulnerabilities around trafficking, and to be able to equip them to take action for themselves and their peers. Now, the ultimate result would be prevention and eradication of this injustice in San Diego County, and furthermore. This program is interactive, which allows the students to join in conversation. Now, it's one thing to stand in front of them and give them the information, but we do really feel, it doesn't do much justice, especially with middle and high schoolers, just to stand up there and give them that information. So it's also drama-based. We do have an amazing team of actors that live out a story of a girl named Amanda. She has friends and is going to school. We also see her interaction with her mother, who is a single parent. And of course, we can't forget her trafficker. Towards the middle of the program, we do give students a chance to jump in the scene and help us change Amanda's story and the outcome of being trafficked. We ask questions along the line of, what would you do different? Should her friends have said something, or something like, how can we recognize what's going on if it's someone we know? Honestly, this is one of my favorite parts of the program, but another essential part of the program is what we call story time. So at every program, we have a survivor facilitator that does have the opportunity to share her personal story of trafficking. And the youth always grasps this portion of it just because it gives a face to the story. And, human trafficking, it does happen in multiple ways. So I do enjoy sharing my story with them and letting them into a vulnerable space right alongside me, just because it might just change their view of what trafficking is and what it looks like. This program, I'm really blessed to be a part of. We are creating prevention in youth, and that's because this is where it usually starts, and we have to try to reach out exactly where they're at. At the end of the program is when we have a little extra time to engage with students, and their feedback is always heartfelt and grateful, but sometimes we do have students who have already either experienced trafficking or know someone who has experienced it. And I met my trafficker when I was 14, so it really just comes to no surprise that some of the youth can relate to my story or Amanda's. And this is exactly why the No More program is essential in the anti-human trafficking movement. We have brought this program to thousands of students and teachers all over San Diego County, and we will continue the work. Another great piece to this is that it is completely free to the schools. So teachers and students get the experience at no cost to them. This program is really at the forefront of changing lives and giving youth the tools to fight off trafficking. I personally feel, it is our job to help the generation prepare for this scary world that's out there. And this is just one way that we're able to do it. This program is really at the front of changing lives and giving youth the tools to fight off trafficking. If it is your interest in being a part of this program, we do have opportunities for you guys to help us join in the fight. I know the No More program is one of 3 unique anti-human trafficking programs that is part of the San Diego Trafficking Prevention Collective. Now, the collective gives students and the community education all across San Diego to protect kids from trafficking. Now, we are currently under a 3-year grant funded by UBS Optimus Foundation, and we are sponsored by the San Diego District Attorney's Office. And while we are blessed to have their help, we also definitely need yours. There are a couple ways you can get involved. One way is by bringing this program to your schools or your community. We would love to bring this type of education to the places you feel would be important to you. All you would need to do is send us an email with some basic information, and we will reach out and honestly be able to do the rest and schedule that. Next would be if you're interested in being an advocate. If you find it's your passion, like it's mine, we'd love to hear from you and seeing what the next steps would be. I know with the pandemic, we are all kind of on pause right now, but that doesn't mean we can't participate. Something you can do now is considering donating. Even though the program is free to schools and the community, there is still a cost to us. So donating will help us in continuing the work we do. If you're interested in helping in any of these areas, you can check out our website for additional information or send an email to Catherine, and I know she would be more than happy to answer any of your questions. Now, the program I would like to kind of just go over on the opposite side of prevention is recovery. Generate Hope is actually a nonprofit house that serves sex trafficking survivors, and we do that by offering them, a real way out. It is a faith-based organization that does provide long-term, comprehensive housing and recovery program to women 18 years and up. Now, our program, are designed to guide the women into full rehabilitation and integration into society. So we work together with law enforcement, churches, and community organizations in San Diego to continue the fight against trafficking in our neighborhood. Our rehabilitative services include treatment program, group therapy, individual therapy, and ongoing support as well. Generate Hope is currently running 2 safe houses here in San Diego County. One is a recovery house and the other is transition. When I first started with them, I was at the recovery house. There they have safe and supportive housing for up to 2 years. It is really a family-like environment. They do have 2 live-in resident guides who are, if I must say, completely amazing. And they're also there for the ladies 24 hours a day. Now, at both of the houses, we have as many as 6 survivors in each home at any given time. And they are able to receive individual and group therapy. We also get the chance to address PTSD and other mental health issues and cover a wide range of topics, including ending the game, betrayal bond, anger management, body image, and so much more beyond that as well. Now, after that, survivors graduate from the recovery program. They do have the option to engage in Generate Hope's transition program. And this is where I'm currently at. We provide the opportunity to grow in independence with staff support, transition program, career development in the context of holistic health and living. So this program supports survivors' goals really towards financial, emotional, intellectual, but also what's really important to us is their spiritual wellness as well. And as far as career, we do push for the movement to continuing the development of their careers, such as working full-time or part-time and attending college as well. Now, being on this team is like I mentioned earlier, it's really a family-like environment. Yes, we have a great program, but the best part is our interaction with each other and the ladies. I mean, we laugh, we celebrate, we support, we uplift each other on our hard days. We do get the chance to give hope to women who sometimes have never interacted that or seen that for themselves. So we get the chance to dive into their pain and their past and give them a real chance at a healthy future. Generate Hope is an amazing program to be a part of. And while I'm extremely blessed to partner with an amazing team, you may wonder, how you can be a part of making a difference. The really great news about this is there's There's a lot of things that you can do to help and to be able to support this program. Donations is always a great place to start. It definitely does take funding to make the work we do possible, and we couldn't do it without you. We do provide 24/7 care for survivors in the program, and your support allows us to continue the work and care for the women that we care for on a daily basis. Now, if you're interested in being more hands-on and would like to volunteer, we do have many opportunities available as well. As you were able to see some of the volunteer opportunities we are looking for, but if you're interested in bringing awareness or being a career mentor, a mentor to the women, we would love for you to be a part of our program. So if, let's just say, I did have a list up, but if you have other talents or different ideas of giving back, we would also like to hear from you as well. You can go ahead and visit our website or email us directly. If you do have any questions or are interested in getting involved, please check out our website or send us some information and we'll get back to you. In closing, I just really wanted to say thank you to everyone who was able to join us today. I know, again, with the pandemic and everything, it's just a complete pleasure that we get the chance to kind of be able to get online and just share this information with everybody. Even if you're looking for additional information, maybe on more information on trafficking or other programs, these two programs that I talked about as well will be able to connect you with some additional information. But again, it was a pleasure to be able to ask to be here today to talk to everybody. It's just Point Loma has just done such an amazing job with allowing us to be here. And I just wanted to thank you for your time.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jessica Kim, and I am the Student Success Coordinator here at the Center for Justice and Reconciliation. I work with the Beauty for Ashes recipients at Point Loma Nazarene University. I am so grateful that you're here today and learning more about human trafficking. I want to say thank you to Keelin and Charisma for their presentation. We have so much information to share with you, and I really appreciate you being here wanting to learn more. I'm going to share my screen right away, and we're going to get right into the presentation. Okay. So I will be talking about the center, CJR as we call it, here at PLNU. But before we do that, I just want to formally introduce myself. Like I said, my name is Jessica Kim. I am currently an MSW candidate at San Diego State University. I'm about to graduate here in less than a month. I'm so excited. I am the co-creator of the No More curriculum, which you just heard about from Keelin. And this is the prevention curriculum for middle school and high school age youth. I'm vice president of the Survivor Leader Network of San Diego, which is a nonprofit that is run by survivors. I'm the survivors voice of the San Diego Human Trafficking CSEC subcommittee. I'm also a PLNU alum, and I was the recipient of the Beauty for Ashes Scholarship. The Center for Justice and Reconciliation here at PLNU, we do many things, right? We work on immigration, on racial injustice, but we are very well known for the work that we do in the anti-human trafficking arena. And we do all of this through research, education to the public, like what I'm doing now, and also advocacy work in the city. So under the CJR, there are 5 programs. We have the No More curriculum, the No More program, which you just heard about. We have the HT Radar Conference. This is a yearly conference where experts from all over the nation come and unite and talk about the most up-to-date information. We just had our conference in February, and over 600 people came out and participated. We have Churches Against Trafficking, which works with our faith-based community here in San Diego County, teaching and teaching them how to be best advocates for the people that they serve. I will be talking about the Beauty for Ashes Scholarship and the On-Ramps Collaborative. So all of these programs are under the CJR. What I want to talk to you today is about the Beauty for Ashes Scholarship. So this fund is a scholarship for survivors of trafficking, a survivor who wants to pursue their undergrad education. So what they would do is they would apply to PLNU. Once they have been accepted into the university, they would then apply for the Beauty for Ashes Scholarship. And if qualified, they would actually cover all of the tuition while the student is here at the university. It is a really, really great program that I am proud to have been a part of as a student. And now I'm back working and further developing the program to build a more holistic program. So not only looking at tuition, but looking at other barriers that the student might have, like housing instability or food instability, or even transportation, right? So anything around them, any barriers that they might come across, I work directly with them to help find resources and alleviate that stress. To date, there have been 6 survivors that have received the scholarship, and 2 of us have graduated. I want to share a video with you about what the scholarship has meant to me, specifically here at the university. So here we go.
I am truly grateful to be here and to have been given this opportunity. So the Beauty to Ashes Scholarship communicates to other survivors that there are people out there that are willing to take action and allow us to have the opportunity to step into our greatness. It is not a free handout. It is an opportunity. It is opening a door, and it's sending the message to us and saying, we believe in you. It has not only changed my life, it has changed the life of my children, of my family. I'm a first-generation college attendee and future graduate. I've come to a place in my life where I no longer operate in fear. I no longer operate in shame. I have been freed. I think of the children. I think of the people that are still trapped. And so I speak for them. I speak for them. For the victims that cannot yet speak for themselves. And I say yet because there will come a day when this injustice will be dealt with. So I speak for that.
So this video was shown at the Hope Rising event in 2017. And the Hope Rising event is a yearly fundraiser where we come and fundraise for the scholarship. I have to say that Point Loma Nazarene University for me has been a life changer. I have been here, when I came here, actually, I had just moved to San Diego and I found out about the university and was accepted into university. And it was amazing just to be here, right? What we do here at the university is not only we educate, of course, but we also build a community. We build a community with love and trust and patience and kindness and all of these qualities that, that a person wants and needs. And so we train them up, and that's what they did for me. They trained me up and they sent me out. Since then, I graduated. I went on to my master's. I'm about to graduate with from my master's program. And it has been amazing. And so that's what we do for the students, for the recipients. And now we're further developing. So we're not only looking at tuition, we're looking at a holistic approach. All the different systems that affect the person. We are just identifying those barriers and breaking them down. We want the person to be successful. And to me, education is really, really important. That's how I was able to change my life, right? Not only my life, but my children's life and many others. And now I'm able to pass that on. And we also know that PLNU is not for everybody. This might be for a few. And so what we want to do is we want to provide as many opportunities to survivors as we can. So that's how the next program came to be. So the On-Ramps Collaborative Program. This is an amazing program that it's the brainchild of Kimberly Jones, who is our director of CJR. And I have come alongside of her, and we're just developing this program. And what it is we're using a collective impact model. So what that means is that we are bringing different organizations that are already doing the work in the anti-human trafficking field. We're bringing them together to help provide on-ramps to survivors, right? So let me show you. And the on-ramps are for education and vocational options. So providing different options to education and vocation so that we can reduce the chances of the survivor going back to the life. We want survivors to be successful. So how can we do that? So this is a little visual of what we are talking about. So imagine a freeway, right? The recipient or the participant would be in a car. There would be a coach next to them trying to navigate the freeway. And there's different on-ramps or off-ramps to opportunities. So for example, the Beauty for Ashes scholarship is one opportunity. So if they decide to go there, then that's where they would go. There's trade schools, there's vocational trainings, there's entrepreneurships. All of these different organizations are coming together and to help support the participant. We are also partnering up with community colleges and other universities because we think that there is power in partnerships. This is the community that PLNU builds, and so we're doing the same thing with other partners outside of the university. And it's exciting. I am excited about what we are doing here at the center. I'm really excited because we are reducing recidivism, right? One of the hardest things for survivors to do is to find a living wage, not just a job. We're not talking about just a job. We're talking about life transformation. We're talking about doing things differently that are long-term success for the individual. But before we can get there, we have to figure out what are the barriers for this individual? What are the opportunities? What are the strengths of this person? Because we are using a strength-based perspective. Every survivor has their strengths. So what are those strengths, and just building on that. And so I'm meeting with the survivors even before they come to PLNU, even before they even know what it is they want to do. I am building a meeting with them and helping them figure those things out. And the MSW actually comes in handy when you're working and trying to figure those things out and working with people. I have life experience, so using that as well and connecting with the survivors. It's just magnificent, all of the transformation that I have seen, that we have seen. Currently, I'm working with over 20 survivors and building these success roadmaps for them, with them. We're working together and building it together. And so I'm very excited about everything that we are doing. So what can you do, right? What are the next steps for you? Because we can't do this alone. We need you as well. You have been informed, you have been educated. All of the things that you have learned here today, you cannot unlearn. These are things you're going to take with you, you're going to process it, you're going to think about it. And so here's some recommendations. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can keep updated, right, on the things that we are doing, that we continue to do. And so you can go to pointloma.edu/CJR and sign up for the monthly newsletter. You can donate, right? If you want to sponsor a survivor through this program, you can donate. We are a nonprofit, right? So all of the money that comes in is through donors, like through the public, through people like you that are willing to donate to sponsor a survivor or somebody that is going through this program. You can donate to the CJR. There's 5 programs in the CJR. You can donate. Just, there's so much work that needs to be done, especially now with this pandemic, that we need your help, right? We can't do this alone. You can keep the conversation going. You can email me if you have any questions or comments or anything like that. My email is jkim1@pointloma.edu. And we'll keep the Q&A section is next. So if you have questions, we can start the conversation there. So I want to thank you again for your time, and I'm going to log out and then go to the Q&A section. So thank you so much.
Thank you for being with us tonight, for listening to those talks. Thank you, Jessica, Keelin, and Charisma, for that great information. Really appreciate it. It is a lot to unpack human trafficking in 45 minutes. It's impossible to do, but thank you for the way you touched on so many different areas. I want to give a shout out to Rihanna. Rihanna is the program director for community relations for the CJR, and she is the brain woman behind this webinar. This was a brand new thing for us to pull off. We usually do these Brewed Awakenings in person on campus 3 times a semester. And with the COVID crisis, we had to very quickly navigate to an online platform. So I just want to acknowledge Rihanna for all that she did to make this happen, because there are a lot of moving parts to webinars. So good job, Rihanna. So let's jump into questions. Please keep them coming my way. I'm watching them through the chat function. So if you go on chat, we got a few through the Q&A function also. Either one is fine, but if you could send them out through chat right now, that would make it a little bit easier for me to manage all the moving parts here. So I'm gonna throw some questions out and have Jessica, Keelin, and Charisma answer them. Could you, let's see, I'm gonna throw this to Keelin first. Can you tell us, what setting does prostitution take place in California, and what's the difference between prostitution and human trafficking?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that when we're looking at the settings, it can definitely happen anywhere. Definitely, in settings that we're not thinking about. And that's something that we teach our students, is that, we want to think that it happens, especially in third world countries, but we have to be realistic in understanding that it's happening right here in our own backyard. And, when it comes to the areas or what that may look like, we may just think of online, but I mean, we have something out here in San Diego where girls are sold right off of the streets. And, traffickers are, not just in schools. I mean, they're in churches, they're at bus stops. I mean, so being very aware of where it's happening and exactly what it looks like tends to be very important, because we have this view of maybe what the movies say it is, or maybe just not being fully educated on the platforms that it happens at.
Great. So I've got a question that came from, actually, let's follow up question on that. Jess, can you talk to us about the difference between prostitution and trafficking? Are they the same thing?
Okay. So I'm not going to go into the legalities of it all. I think Charisma could probably follow up on that. But as a survivor, these situation, or how we're groomed, we're made to believe like this is something that we choose to do, right? We are choosing to go out and sell ourselves to bring back money and all of this. So it's presented as a prostitution scenario. But what happens is that it evolves into trafficking. So anytime there's a third person involved where there's money exchanged, and it becomes a trafficking situation where you're being groomed and you're being lied to and coerced and just put in danger all of the time. So it becomes a very dangerous situation. I've never met, I've been part of the life before. I was part of the life for a long time, and I had never met anyone, any of the girls or guys that were out there saying that this is a chosen profession. Like that was not the case. I never heard anybody say that. Anytime someone would be given the option to get out, they would say, absolutely, there's nothing, great about this kind of, it's very dangerous. And, it's just not what people perceive it to be, right? So,
And Jessica, a lot of times we talk about the difference between the choice of no choices, right? Mm-hmm. The impossible choice. There are factors that drive people into prostitution and into the exploitation of trafficking that are basic human needs, like shelter and food. Charisma, could you talk? We got a great question from Zach about men and boys. We've talked a lot about female trafficking, but how are men and boys impacted? Are they trafficked? Are they exploited?
Yes, certainly. And some of the reports or studies that have been published, they'll even say that it's up to 50% who either are male identified persons, but disproportionately, right, women and girls are definitely, more impacted but what's difficult about men and boys is the way that men and boys are expected to behave, right? These societal norms. So there's a couple of things that definitely come to mind, because when we also talk about labor trafficking, there's definitely a lot of male identified folks, especially children, who can get caught up in like candy selling rings. I've even heard where they're pretending, they go door to door and they pretend to sell, do fundraisers, like different kinds of fundraisers, but it's just all suspicious. And so the Department of Labor is really tracking, they're really tracking those kinds of businesses, if you will, that are using children on purpose to do, to sell these things, but nothing's really, the trafficker is actually taking the profits directly from the children. Something else I want to say is that boys or young men are mostly bought by other men when it comes to sex trafficking. And so the difficulty for boys or men to even identify as being sex trafficked victims is hard due to homophobia, because folks will automatically assume that because you're being bought by a man, then that means you're obviously gay. when in fact, for some people, for some males, that's not the case at all. That just happens to be the market that demands, right? That is demanding their type of sex act, if you will. So it's really important that we, really understand these nuances. And even going back to the difference between if sex trafficking and prostitution is the same, I would even say that the broader umbrella of human trafficking is much larger than that of the penal code definition of prostitution, right? Because prostitution really only involves sex trafficking, and it leaves out the labor piece, which is really important, where under the human trafficking umbrella, right, you have sex, you have labor, you even have organ trafficking, those types of things. And so I think that the prosecution, in terms of how harsh penalties are, access to services, protection, those things are much larger. But we can also think about the issue of prostitution and trafficking being along a continuum, if you will, a continuum of violence, a continuum of commodification, things like that. Because sadly, for some folks, like I use the example of stripping, that it could potentially be sex, like a sex act that graduates into harder types of sex acts, right? So a person may think that, oh, I'm just going to dance. But in actuality, whoever has recruited them, already has other plans. And because of coercion and control and things like that, the person, feels like they can't leave that situation without getting hurt or someone else getting hurt, if they try to do so.
So let's talk a little bit about men and their role in all of this. You've talked some about men and boys and how they're exploited and impacted by exploitation, but what about men who want to make a difference in the fight to end trafficking? I'll throw this to any one of the three of you that like to talk about that, but I'd also like to talk about demand and how the role that men play in the business side and the demand of it. But let's start with, is there any place for men in this fight? Is there any role for them?
Jessica or Keelin, did you want to go?
I think that's absolutely a huge role. I think it's one thing for us to stand up and say something, but I think for men to stand up and at the bar high to put it out there that trafficking or buying and selling of women and children is not okay. Other men will follow suit in seeing that. But I also think that setting a standard is, sometimes they think it's harmless to go to strip clubs or to watch pornography, when a lot of the women or children that are on there who are under 18 are also traffic victims as well. So I think that they need to use their voice in this field. And there are some incredible men who are out there and taking a step forward, but we definitely need a lot more. And I think it will also help, just like it would be easier for a female victim to talk to another female. We do have boys and men who are trafficked. So just as much as we're needed in women in the field, we need the men. We need the men who have been trafficked. They need to have somebody to feel comfortable to come and talk to if they're not comfortable talking to women. So we definitely need a higher raise in men taking that step forward.
I think I've heard it said there might not always be a trafficker, but there's always a buyer, right? So I think having that education piece, it would take just a cultural change for the highly sexualized environment that we live in, the social media, and how women are portrayed, and how we are viewed as objects, as sex objects. So it would take having men hold other men accountable for their, for their actions, and to just know the pain and suffering that is behind the pornography that somebody might be watching, or you know, there's high demand wherever there is sporting events or anything like that, there's always a higher demand, and sexual exploitation goes up. So it's, the demand side is definitely a piece that needs to be spoken about and explored, because that is a piece that sometimes is missing and not talked about much. So Charisma, do you want to say something?
And, you know, I think it's important too, as you had mentioned, like about a cultural shift, right, is where there's zero tolerance for that kind of behavior. And so, you know, lately there's been some, you know, good movements, right? The Me Too movement and things like that, where, you know, women and other men are, and, you know, all genders are really calling it out that, you know, it's not okay to do this. I wanted to share, there was this, I've been reading a lot around, you know, how is this pandemic affecting, you know, survivors or people who are still maybe 1 foot in the game and 1 foot out. And what I read was that porn companies, because, you know, everyone is online, right? Because, you know, we can't go anywhere. So it's really spiked how many hours, you know, people are online now. And porn companies are actually offering free viewings to kind of hook people. So I guess normally you would pay for some kind of subscription, you know, to this. And they're saying that it has really spiked. And then it said, according to Google Analytics, porn searches skyrocketed by 4,700% when kids are out of school. And so it's understanding this behavior of what drives people to there. And it's one thing to be curious, right? Especially if we're talking about children and developmental stages and all things like that. But then it's another to stay there, right? And to grow with this obsession, you know, or whatever it may be. But I also, I'm scrolling really quickly because I could not believe it. Here it is. It said that Pornhub quickly jumped at the opportunity to bolster their business. Guising themselves as benefactors, they are graciously giving 50,000 masks to emergency workers and benevolently, providing free access to their online porn services. And so they're attracting individuals, you know, thinking, oh, I'm doing this great thing. But then once you see what they offer, right, you see this as a gift. I mean, but that's just a total ploy. And so, you know, really thinking about what are the conditions that survivors and current victims are living in, especially due to this pandemic, and how maybe they may be so limited to be reaching out for help, but how also businesses are taking advantage of creating more demand.
Thank you, Charisma, for addressing that. I thought maybe Keelin might have some insight too. We've gotten some questions about the COVID crisis and how it's impacting, specifically impacting people who are being exploited. So from the Generate Hope perspective, I know from what I'm understanding, most of the residential facilities and organizations right now are not able to take new residents into their programs because of the crisis. So what are some things you're hearing and seeing are the pressures increasing on people that are in the life and trying to get out?
I would definitely say so. I mean, it seems like everything has came to a halt, and that means our prevention, our awareness has came to a stop. I mean, and it's just hard. I mean, even if we're looking at the No More program, now we're not even being able to get into the schools and help the student being trafficked. And we can't even provide them help in this moment, which we're hoping that will change while everything's turning online. But again, yeah, we're not accepting anybody right now, which is hard as well, because there's too many women out there. And when we're looking at Generate Hope as a whole, right, we provide shelter, we provide holistic, I mean, we provide that, but there's not enough of that as it is. So there's not enough shelters. I mean, there's just not enough beds, there's not enough homes, especially here in San Diego County. So with COVID-19 happening, it really does seem like everybody's at a halt. Now, we may be at a halt and some of the prevention awareness we do, but the trafficking doesn't stop.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's kind of the combat, and the hard part that I'm having is because I feel like at least all of us, we want to do so much more, but we are trying to find creative ways to kind of get around it, to still be able to reach out to these ladies and these women. But it's definitely been hard. It has been hard.
So I'm not sure if this came up or not, but let's talk about the idea of a child prostitute. So is there such a thing as a child prostitute, Charisma?
No, not at all. Especially, you know, the operative word there is child, right? And so, you know, as you all heard in my presentation, that, you know, by law, any child, any person under the age of 18, they're automatically considered a sex trafficking victim, right? If they find themselves in that situation. And that's really important to understand. It's because, you know, kids cannot consent to sex. And so, you know, when we talk about which children should be helped versus which, you know, the stereotypes, right, that come along with those things, that each child, because they are a child, that they should be protected as such. And so, you know, it's sexual abuse, it's physical abuse, it's emotional abuse, it's general neglect by the parents, especially if the parent is failing to protect their child. And I want to preface this with saying there certainly are parents who are doing everything they possibly can to protect their child, but literally without physically locking them down somehow or locking them in a room. If that child wants to go back into the streets, you know, that child is going to go back into the streets. And so that makes me think about harm reduction strategies and things like that, because we have to think about the psychological hold, right, that traffickers and maybe even some buyers have. But what's difficult about child versus adult, for me, right, a victim is a victim is a victim. And so that's why this human rights based approach to me is actually more fitting, because it's universal, that if you are a victim being bought or, you know, sold, you are entitled to the same rights regardless of age, because you are being exploited. And so, but, you know, we see in the field, in lots of things where people are like, well, she's an adult, you know, she's 18 and over, she knows what kind of choice she's making. But as I mentioned, people who are in positions, you know, of vulnerability, it's really about the context in which they find themselves and the hard, you know, choice of no choices that they're having to make. And so when I think about how lots of folks are out of work right now, how if your landlord isn't, you know, going along with other landlords and maybe waiving rent, how are you paying rent, right? Especially if you've been laid off. And so what are folks turning to or forced to turn to meet their economic needs, to basically, right, shelter, food, clothing, those kinds of things, pay for even medications. So it's really a very trying time for people who are now physically trapped, right? Physically trapped indoors, possibly with the perpetrators of abuse and exploitation.
Mm-hmm. So let's go back to the whole issue of in the schools. Keelin talked about No More, and both Jessica and Keelin are facilitators with our No More program, and Charisma was one of the developers of it. So they're all really uniquely qualified to speak to this. But when we first developed No More, it came out of the research. So the research study that came out in 2015 showed that recruitment of kids was happening in our schools. And we went to 20 area high schools and found evidence of recruitment or active trafficking in almost all of them. And so San Diego Unified School District actually approached Point Loma and asked us to develop a prevention curriculum, and that's how No More was born. What we intended to be an awareness and prevention tool has actually, it is serving as that, and over 10,000 people have seen it. It's actually becoming it's become an identification tool. So we have had kids who have seen no more in their school and then have gone to one of our actors or facilitators and identified themselves as an active victim. So what do we do when we're in a school and we're telling kids about trafficking and a kid comes up to us and identifies themselves as a victim? What's the, or what if a law enforcement officer comes across a kid on the street and recognizes him as a victim? What's the protocol for somebody who's under 18?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, Jess, can you talk at all to that? Like, what do we do? What do we do in the schools? And I know Charisma actually helped write the rapid response protocol.
Yeah, so I think she would probably be more qualified to
Yes. Have the author here.
The person who developed it.
So it's going to be a part of one of your resources as a part of this webinar. But San Diego County Office of Education, in collaboration with the CSEC Steering Committee, created a protocol on a model protocol for what schools can do, right? If a child does disclose, to a mandated reporter who might be a part of the school community. And so there's a number of things where either the SRO, the school resource officer, could be involved, and a call is made to the child abuse hotline. And what would happen then is that a social worker from child welfare will go out with an advocate. And if it's, at the school, or if law enforcement may have the victim, go right out into the field wherever the victim may be, and offer immediate resources and support. Because also the determination of what is the role of the parents needs to be assessed, because social workers have come across where parents, relatives or caregiver was actively involved in their exploitation. And then, as you heard me mention earlier, you do have parents who maybe had no idea or are trying to do everything they can, and maybe we can bolster, right, support for them. And so for law enforcement officers, if they run across what I imagine would be maybe a kid who is breaking curfew, and maybe they're on the run, they find out, right, they're a runaway, they're on the run, whatever their situation may be. And if they suspect any kind of exploitation or trafficking, they're mandated reporters as well. But they also have the ability, officers also have the ability to hold children for their own safety, if they think if releasing the child or letting the child be without any further interventions would put the child at greater risk. And so the officer would also cross-report to the child abuse hotline. And so there's two potential pathways, right, that a child could receive services. But then there's also our incredible community partners, such as San Diego Youth Services STAR program, or the iCare program, or if you're up in the North County Lifeline Project Life, amongst a lot of other community-based organizations. And so we're hoping that the practice becomes no wrong door, right? Wherever a child who may be exploited, whatever door they walk through, that hopefully they can receive the help and support that they need. And also for their parents or their family, how to take care of a child who has been exploited, because I would imagine it's not the same, right? That this family dynamics would just change.
So Jessica, can you speak to why do you think having survivor leaders a part of No More is important? Like, how have you seen that change the dynamic in the room? So we have a group of actors who are high school or college age, and they're portraying high school age kids primarily. And then we always have a survivor leader who helps deliver the curriculum for No More. Why does that matter?
So I think as a person, as a child who might be experiencing this kind of situation, we are not told what this is, right? We are not told this is trafficking. We have no such vocabulary. We don't know it's exploitation. We just think, you know what, this is how I got a new phone, or this is how I'm able to eat or get a roof over my head or a bed or whatever. we don't know the right vocabulary or lingo to it. So when someone comes, like we do, into the schools and we start explaining all of these different ways that a person is groomed and a person, and you know what it looks like and all of these things, and we play it out with them, they begin to slowly open up, right? It's like, okay, this is cool, this is interactive, this is a play, this is a real story. And then we go in as just facilitators. We don't self-identify to the youth or to anyone until it's time to tell the story. And so, and that's an option too for us. If we want to tell our story or not, it's up to us. Like this is totally voluntary. And so we share our story, and there's something that happens in the room when a survivor tells the story. People connect in a different level. All of the doubt and fear kind of just, you can literally see the walls coming down. And it's empowering, right? Because you're looking at somebody that has gone through a situation of trafficking, has come out, and now is talking about it to empower other people and say, you know what, this is what happened to me, and I was able to get out, and this is how I got out. And if there's hope for me, there's hope for you too. There's nothing more powerful than that, right? And so this is where you get the youth to open up and to come forward and say, okay, maybe this is a safe person that I can disclose this to. And then that's how it just begins, it evolves.
Thank you. So before we change direction a little, there's another area about Know More that I want to talk about. Know More is the prevention curriculum. It's different. So we have lots of prevention types of curriculum out there for not driving drunk, not doing drugs, not being a bully. Know More is different because it's drama-based. So we are so blessed that we have Catherine Schrock on our team at the center. She is an actor and a producer and director with a theater background, and she brought the forum theater element to Know More. Mm-hmm. So forum theater, Keelin, if you could talk about what is forum theater. So we're not talking about just a dramatic presentation to the kids. What part do the kids have to play in the drama?
Yeah, they have such a huge part. And I think this is why I love the program so much. And that's kind of what I mentioned in the presentation. It's something to get up and, educate the students on exactly what it is. But when they're able to step into the story and participate, it takes on a whole nother life of itself. So, going through it, we get to show the program, show Amanda's stories, her friends, her struggles. But towards the end of the program, we get to ask them questions on how they would tell the story. But not only do we ask them the question, they get to jump in and engage in the theater play themselves. So I'll ask them to come to the front of the stage and go ahead and ask on a particular part of the play, how would you have changed this? What would you have said? And I think that that's so important because we're giving them a voice, right? It's not just us telling our and what we think, but allowing them to have a voice in the story, which actually changed the trajectory for them because now they've done it once, they can do it again. It's not going to feel so unfamiliar to them because they've already stepped in and helped before. And I think that's why it's so important, the drama-based portion of it. Again, because it's just so different than any program that I've ever seen. And I know for them, it does change, their outcome, the way that they look at it. So I just believe that that's probably one of the best portions of the program as well.
Awesome. Great. Thank you for that, Keelin. So let's talk about massage establishments. So you can drive down pretty much, there's lots of areas around San Diego where you drive down Claremont Mesa Boulevard. I can think of one right next door to my chiropractor in La Mesa. So we have massage establishments, massage parlors all over town. Are those legit? What's going on in those? How does trafficking interface with our massage establishments in town?
Do you want? I can take that.
Okay.
So massage parlors or massage establishments, I think, are a perfect example of where you see labor and sex affect a person. So oftentimes women who are recruited, and sometimes from other countries, are recruited thinking that, you know, they are going to earn a massage license, it's going to be legit. And, you know, a big driver of why folks want to come to the United States to work is because they actually send money home. And this certainly has been, you know, the experiences of women that I've worked with in the Philippines. You know, they would do whatever they needed to do to send money back home because the employment, you know, there was just none. So they think that they're coming to work in a massage parlor, and it may start off like that. And this is where it's more like this labor piece, right? Because maybe they don't even know how much, what is the going rate for a massage therapist, right? There's usually standards of wages, if you will, versus, you know, someone who went to school versus someone who didn't go to school, but you can still be eligible for this kind of license. So they may be having their wages, you know, they could be earning $5 where maybe they were per hour where they're supposed to be earning 20. But because they're not from here, they're not familiar with labor laws and things like that, they may not even know. And so that could be considered potentially, right, a labor violation or even potentially a labor trafficking victim, just kind of depending on what the elements are. Because, you know, force, fraud, and coercion need to be a part of that. But due to the circumstance, and this is where the gender-based violence or gender-based issues come in, is that because, you know, since she is a woman, her biology is what will make her more likely be trafficked also for sex. Like, does that make sense, right? And so you see this person move from labor trafficking now into sex trafficking. And so it's really interesting because I think a lot of people maybe don't necessarily make that connection. And that I'm hoping that either buyers in those establishments or those who own those establishments, that they're being prosecuted for both, right? For both labor and sex trafficking. So I really think that there's an underground culture. You know, men who have gone to such establishments unknowingly that there were extra services that were available. There were code words they said, or they were even straight up asked if they wanted an additional service, which was a sex act, for this much more money. And they realized, oh my God, I'm in one of those kinds of establishments. But I think it's actually more common than folks realize.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and so there's actually a pretty interesting effort going on in San Diego that came out of the San Diego City Council this year. We were in a situation in San Diego where massage establishments were not regulated by the police. So they really had no ability or cause to enter an establishment and identify if something was going on. So we actually changed our regulations in the city of San Diego starting January 1st of this year, where all massage establishments now have to have a police permit to operate. And that then gives the ability for San Diego PD to monitor. So we're hopeful that that is going to have an impact by requiring this permitting and then opening the doors for San Diego PD. But we also know that exploiters and traffickers are extremely savvy. And just like we were talking about earlier, when the, COVID-19 popped up, people are stuck in their homes, and the porn sites took advantage of that. So we know that there are loopholes everywhere, but we're hopeful that the new permitting process will impact it. We also know that when the city of San Diego takes decisive action, it will tend to push the crime then out of the city limits and into the areas. Do any of you have anything else to add about massage establishments? I feel like that's one of those places that the buyer the male buyer go and somehow justify it more easily than buying somebody and meeting them in a hotel room. So taking advantage of somebody that has a vulnerability of being from another country and a language barrier in a establishment that looks like a business, I think tends to lower in the buyer's mind this idea that they're doing something wrong, that it perpetuates that belief that this person is here by choice and is doing what they're doing by choice. So any other thoughts on that?
The massage industry is pretty, it's an industry that is very much underground. And as much as it is underground, there are very public like internet websites where the buyers just go and like rate the girls, you know, and talk about, like, openly just talk about, you know, the cost and what they did and all of these things. So although it is an underground kind of thing, it's really very open.
Right. At the same time.
Yeah, at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we'll start to see too as time goes on, especially with the movement, right? We just, I mean, within the last couple of years have changed from looking at as these victims, you know, first they were looked at as criminals. You know, we were taken to jail with charges, and now we're stepping into a movement where we're survivors and thrivers. But I think right now we're going to start to be able to see that we're looking at the massage parlors, right? And then we're looking at online. But I think as time goes on and the more we develop the way that we look at it, we'll start to see a lot more companies come out that have a ton of deal to do with human trafficking and the exploitation of women as well. I think we're just now hitting the surface. And I think that that's the scary part, but I think that's why we're in it for the work that we do as well.
Yeah.
Great point, Keelin. I think we know that there are thousands of victims in San Diego. So we think anywhere between 3,500 and 8,000 victims at any given moment. So right now in San Diego. And yet when we look at the people that actually interface with our local service providers, we're talking maybe in the, you know, 100 or in the low 100s. So I'm getting a couple other questions that let's just do some really quick, like rapid fire responses on some of these, and we're going to wind up a little bit early tonight, but so I want to do some rapid fire answers on a couple questions, and then we're going to close with talking about how people can get involved at the university. So gay and transgender youth, Charisma, are they more vulnerable than just youth in general?
Yes, because of the lack of services that are available. You know, this is what I'm really understanding in terms of the impact of this pandemic, is that marginalized groups and inequities are further amplified, right? We are really seeing marginalized communities were already struggling pre-COVID, and how much more now. And so definitely for LGBTQ youth, especially if they are kicked out of their homes, right? Because their families have rejected them, right? They're not accepting that kind of lifestyle or behavior in their homes. They often find themselves on the street. And it's where those basic needs can't be met, you know, whether it's food, shelter, clothing, transportation, where, you know, someone, usually an adult, will take advantage of that vulnerable situation. And especially in this time now with COVID, you know, folks don't want to be on the streets, and, you know, maybe they'll do anything they need to do to actually be somewhere cleaner, safer, right? What appears to be that way. But sadly, the situation can change so quickly. And so there's a lot of resources during this time, especially that are directed to those marginalized populations, such as the LGBTQ community.
So that leads to another question. Knowing that this social distancing that stay-in-place orders that we're under,
Mhm.
knowing that that's pushing already vulnerable people into even more vulnerable situations. Are you aware of any opportunity for new kinds of outreach, or are you aware of anything going on in our community that would, because we know we don't have, it's not as easy to get into a residential program right now if you're a victim. We also know that we don't have residential programs for men and boys, and very few for minors. So we already have a big shortage. But are any of you aware of any kind of unique outreach that's going on right now in this time?
Yeah, so what I'm seeing a lot of is the option to text, right? Because when you're in close quarters with folks, you know, that's when usually victims will ask for help, is when the perpetrator of the abuse is at work, you know, out of the home. But now in this time where, you know, we're all quarantined in place, that really can't happen now. So what happens when you can't make, right, a phone call? So text messaging to like different hotlines, like the National Human Trafficking Hotline, you can text, DV victims can text, even suicide prevention lines have chat lines, and things like that. And so that kind of outreach, or even on social media, Instagram has been, I mean, phenomenal in doing outreach, where it's really like quick reference guides, if you will, in one IG post and one Instagram post that can share tons of information. And so as scary as it is with people having access, you know, to people who are online more, the technology can also be used to counteract, right, to do more creative or innovative outreach. I also want to point out there are some really good organizations that are offering safety plans, like how do you remain safe even if you're still in the home with your abuser, right? Whether that's trafficking, domestic violence, sexual assault, and they really talk about real strategies on how to remain safe for you and your children, if you have children. And so we can post those resources later, because I think it's really important. Like someone may say, oh, sure, I'm going to go ahead and call a hotline or text a hotline. But for survivors or victims, like they need real, tangible, concrete things they can do to do their best to remain safe at this time until they can actually find a way to get out safely.
Thanks, Charisma. Go,
I've heard of other efforts that are happening where communities coming together. Although people are not able to go into the homes and see what's going on, we're still using cameras, we're still using Zoom. So educating, for example, teachers that are holding classes, right, to kind of detect some red flags, if you will, of different situations that might be going on. Just keeping that connection with youth. I know with the people that I work with, it has been really important to stay connected, not only because of going back to the life, but the mental health aspects too. This has been really re-triggering for a lot of us, and having that community and the support to get through this has been really important.
Yeah, just to kind of go off of that as well, outreach, again, everything is online. So I do know, and talking with Catherine, that we will be pushing the No More program because the students are still at home. So we will still be doing an interactive online with the youth as well for the No More program.
great. So Charisma just pushed out to everybody on chat some numbers on crisis line numbers to everybody, and we'll also put that on the email that goes out. So a couple things in wrapping up. Somebody asked, Victoria asked, how can you get involved on campus at Point Loma? That's a great question, because we know we have quite a few students that are on this webinar tonight. So the CJR it exists because of students. We are deeply committed to helping students engage and take their interests and passions through the lens of their faith and figure out what to do about it. So we actually have a lot of ways for students to get involved. This year we have 4 students on our staff and about 25 ambassadors. So CJR ambassadors are students that help with our programs. We have programs promoting fair trade and worker justice, along with anti-trafficking. And then we have programs looking at immigration and what it looks like to live and work within the border community that we live here on the border with Tijuana. So if you will email us at cjr@pointloma.edu and ask to be put on our mailing list, we will, if you're a student, let us know if you're a student and we'll put you on our student side of our mailing list. And but we also have a general CJR email newsletter that goes out every month that we try not only share what we're doing at the center, but what some of the other local partners are doing and promote other opportunities. So joining our newsletter would be a really important way. The center also has the Churches Against Trafficking underneath our care. And Churches Against Trafficking has been around for about 5 years and is an organization that was originally started by Ginger Shaw and Susan Johnson and Nate Alcorn from the church at Rancho Bernardo, and then was handed into our care in the last couple of years. And Churches Against Trafficking is designed to help empower and teach people that are part of faith communities get involved in the work. And we are working right now to try to help promote the work of California Against Slavery, which is an organization based in San Diego, but it has a statewide directory of services. So if you go to CaliforniaAgainstSlavery.com, you can see a statewide directory of all kinds of resources around anti-trafficking efforts. And California Against Slavery has developed a list of needs for our local organizations. They're doing it across the state, but we have a San Diego specific list. These are organizations like Generate Hope, Alabaster Jar, Salvation Army, North County Lifeline, San Diego Youth Services, and more that are working directly with survivors, and they are feeling the pinch right now. They are dealing with things that we might never consider, like the fact that you can't get online grocery delivery with an EBT card. So if you're not able to leave your residence to get groceries, we have challenges there. We have facilities and organizations that are housing women who've come out of the life and are trying to rebuild their lives, who are quickly depleting their budgets trying to deal with this emergency situation we're in. So the California Against Slavery, like I said, has developed a list of needs. So one of the easy things to do, I actually pushed this out on my own personal Facebook the other day. It was my birthday, and so I put on Facebook for my birthday, would my friends jump on and order something for, this was specifically for Salvation Army, because they're dealing right now with women who have kids, and they're one of the few facilities that houses children also. And they ended up in a situation with about 50 kids who are now out of school because of COVID, without a lot to do. The playgrounds shut down because of COVID. So the simple thing of just sending inexpensive games and craft supplies to Salvation Army is one easy way that almost anybody could help. So there are lots of ways to get involved. We'd love any students that are listening to plug in, again, by emailing us at cjr@pointloma.edu, and we'll get you connected to our student ambassadors. So we're going to wrap this up. It's 8:15. We're going to close out a little bit early tonight. I just want to, I want to end with just a little moment, one reminder, and that is that we will be sending out the recording of this that you can forward on to people, along with a resource list and some follow-up action items. Be in touch with us. We love connecting. A big thank you to the 3 of you for participating tonight. After probably a long day, I don't know about you, but I spend a lot of time on Zoom these days. So thanks for bringing your expertise to us tonight. Thanks again to Rihanna for coordinating all of this. Let's close out with quickly, each of the 3 of you telling the crowd what, in the middle of all this really hard stuff, what gives you hope? Charisma.
What really gives me hope is that despite what us as human beings may be experiencing, whether, you know, it's a loss of a loved one, especially, you know, because resources are so limited around like COVID and things like that, is really this this ability to rise, right? To rise to the occasion. I mean, we're seeing it all around us, that there's, you know, folks are coming together to meet for mutual aid, community caring, that we truly are not alone. And so, and sadly, sometimes it takes such a shakeup, right, to what we understand our normalcy to be, for us to really be grateful for what has always been there. And for me, that is each other. And so that mutual support, the empathy, the compassion, more than ever that people are showing now, the kindness, you know, that's what we're about, is our ability to receive as well as to give back and reciprocate.
Great. Jess, what gives you hope?
Well, I think that people that show up to things like this, and I think, you know, this is what really motivates me and gives me hope, knowing that people really care about subjects like this. It's heaviness, and but it's real. Like, this is what is impacting our communities. This is what is happening. And for people to want to come in here and hear the hard truth, that is hopeful, because it's we're coming into a new day, right? Like, all of this shakeup, all of these things that we're all going through, we're not going to come out of it the same. And so I'm hopeful that that we will evolve as a community, as a united community, to do better. You know, once we know how to do better, we do better. And I think this is what it's going to take. And so I'm hopeful for that.
Yes. Keelin, what about you? What gives you hope?
I would have to say my faith. I mean, just knowing exactly where I've come from to where I'm at today, to the amazing women who are here with us, and everybody who's joined us, is that we're all going through a tough time right now. It's a huge change. Everybody's affected. But to know that I have the faith to sustain it, to continue the work that we do, even though it's hard, it's triggering. We continue to stand together as a community to overcome these situations. And it's just like this with COVID. It's like, we will come out of it. We'll come out of it tougher. We'll tell our kids about it. I mean, it's just something that we've continued over time as humanity to be successful and be on top of it, no matter how hard it is. So to know that we're going to continue that, and my faith has given me all the hope.
Great. Well, thank you, Charisma, Jessica, Keelin. You were amazing. And thank you for being willing to move this show onto the online platform. Thank you, all of you, for joining us. We had a great turnout tonight. Really excited about that. And we also have people that couldn't attend but registered and will be looking at the video later. So I think we had a significantly bigger reach getting to do this. So this is making lemonade out of lemons. But thank you for bringing your vulnerability and your expertise. And thank you for the commitment that you have to our community. The three of you literally are pouring your lives into this work every day. And you inspire me, and you are what gives me hope. It's your faces that get me up in the morning and give me hope. So thank you for being you, and thank you to all of our participants for joining us tonight. And we will look forward to seeing you again, hopefully in person.
Yes.
Good night.
Thank you.